My name is Jeff Little, and for the past 36 years, I've been a registered investment advisor and certified financial planner. I got started working for a financial planner and registered investment advisor in Carmel, California. Probably started in high school. I took a bookkeeping class and I really enjoyed the bookkeeping. And I learned with the accounting that you learned what a business was truly doing, and you learned the story behind the financial statements and the typical follow the money type story. That's what the accounting told you. So when I went to college, I majored in accounting, and I was fortunate enough to be able to work for a produce firm that my father worked for in Salinas. And when I was there for spring break and summer break, they were going through an audit, and so the auditors found out I was an accounting major, and so they had me help on the audit, and I learned a lot about doing an audit, and I learned that I didn't want to do that. And the reason I didn't want to do that is because the people we were performing the audit on, even though I knew them, they took on a different presence. They didn't like to be tracked, and you were finding errors that they were committing. So I knew I wanted to go into accounting, but you were either going to go into auditing or taxation. I knew that the auditing, after having just a couple weeks to a couple months worth of experience, I didn't want to do that. Took a lot of tax courses, and that seemed like more law than accounting. It wasn't really telling me, it was telling me part of the story, but it was more law, finding out whether you were conforming with tax law or not with tax law. And so once I got into the business courses, I took a couple finance courses that were taught by some great professors that that had investment experience and were actually working for mutual funds. And the stories that they told were absolutely fascinating about the investing. And I found that the accounting really helped tell those stories about what was happening with those companies, and that's where my love for investing began, was with those classes and with those professors. And I graduated from the University of Utah in 1982, and in 1982, one of the emerging fields was financial planning. And so the financial planning is kind of like an analogy of building, and you have a subcontractor or a general contractor that will coordinate all these other specialists. You have tile work and roofers and so on and so forth. And that's the general philosophy behind the financial planning, is you'll have a general practitioner that will help the client determine what type of house they want. Is it going to be a modern house? Is it going to have crown molding, so on and so forth? Figure out what they want, and then bring in specific professionals if you, as the general financial planner, don't have the answers. And so it was an evolution of all of those things that brought me to this field. I think that you have to have a blend of people skills and analytical skills. There's a lot of analysis that goes on with financial planning and investing, but you're working with people, and you have to have the people skills in terms of asking good questions, probing questions. Oftentimes people don't know exactly what they want, and so you have to ask good questions. As a natural follow-on to that, you have to be a good listener. So just because you've asked a good question doesn't mean that it ends there. You have to be a good listener and be able to put yourself in the client's shoes. And so your decisions and your advice are reflective of where they're coming from. Honesty is brutally important in this. As an advisor, you're a fiduciary, which puts the clients first in every decision. And as Rotarians, the four-way test really applies to investments and financial planning. And if you don't follow the four-way test, people aren't going to have the confidence in you. So you need to speak the truth. Is it the truth? You need to build, friendships and have goodwill. It needs to be beneficial to all concerned, and it can't be a lopsided relationship. And if so, those are some of the vital skills that you need to have in order to be successful in this career. In order to take the CFP exam, you have to have a bachelor's degree. They're not really specific on what the bachelor degree needs to be in, but it should be in, I believe, in some form of business, whether it's accounting or investing, finance. Economics would probably be beneficial also, but I think it should be in a specific business-related area. Then, if you want to be a certified financial planner, you need to take the exam to be a financial planner. Probably the favorite thing in my career is helping people. It's nice to be able to apply your knowledge and help people through the process where they feel more comfortable with their money, with their financial future. And there's no better feeling than helping somebody obtain their life goals and making money for people. That's, in the investment world, that's the bottom line. Are you making money for people? And that's the most joy that you can get. Some of the biggest challenges are staying current in the profession, the long hours that are involved in order to stay current and also run a practice. Also finding out exactly what people are looking for. Sometimes they have a hard time being able to communicate to you what they're really looking for, and being able to assess what people are looking for and help them determine whether it's realistic or not. That's a challenge in the business, and it's difficult to try and break to somebody that maybe that their goals are unrealistic and that they need to be changed. But you need to be honest with people and give them a professional opinion on that. For somebody who's first starting out, learn as much as you can. There's an awful lot of free information that's on the internet. And you need to implement it in your own life. And as time goes on, people are going to look for a financial professional that's successful. It's be pretty difficult for somebody to go to a financial professional that's either declared bankruptcy or hasn't invested their own money into something and has actually done it on their own. The other thing that I would recommend is not to try and start out on your own, but to work for somebody else in a well-established firm that you respect so you can get on that learning curve. It's a big challenge to try and develop a clientele and be able to organize a business plan and start getting up and running with your own business. So that's something that is difficult to do, but I think is really important to get your career off to a good start. There's a lot of multitasking since I am in the investment area. The stock market on the West Coast is open between 6:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. So um, that's a core time period where you're really watching, seeing what's happening in the market, and it's best not to be trying to make your decisions on what you're going to be doing with the investments when the market is open. You should really have your strategy set. So after market hours is the best time to review and accumulate the data for your analysis and decide what you're going to be doing during the next day, week, month, so on and so forth. And so so my typical day is I'm watching the market in some form or another, sometimes more intently, depending upon what's happening in the market environment. Some time periods there's a lot more volatility. Those time periods you're more focused on the market and you really don't have the ability to multitask. When you have calmer markets and things are, it's kind of like sailing. If there's choppy waters and turbulent weather, then you're going to be more focused. When the wind is to your back and it's sunny and smooth sailing, then you can do more multitasking during those market hours. You usually don't meet with clients unless it's an absolute necessity during market hours, so that's usually saved till the afternoon. And my hours, most of my research will take place either on the weekend or between 8 and 12 o'clock at night. Way too many, probably 70 to 90. It's difficult to say. Artificial intelligence is just emerging. I remember back in the early 80s, there was a software provider that was coming up with what they called artificial intelligence at that time. It was basically a string of if-then statements. If your client's checking account balance is this, then they need 6 months of expenses for an emergency fund. So it was pretty basic if-then stuff. The artificial intelligence is changing over time. So there are hopefully quite a few tasks that current financial planners and advisors are doing now that they won't need to do and then would be better served by artificial intelligence. Whether that's going to actually reduce in the number of man hours is going to be difficult to say at this point. But usually the technology creates different jobs, and so hopefully the profession is able to adapt to it. But I think that there will always need to be that human contact that you'll need to have that general contractor to help review your different options. There's also, I've read a couple studies that probably 38% of the financial planners and investment advisors are my age, approximately 60 years old, that will be retiring within the next 10 years. And so there's a big growth area there to replace those advisors. And the under 35 is approximately 10% of the advisors. So there's going to be a big demand, I believe, in the future going forward, even with artificial intelligence, maybe taking over some of those tasks. But you have the baby boomers. We have a record number of people that are reaching age 65 and living to be now 100. So that's one of those things we're having to change with financial plans, is that people are living longer. And so I think there are going to be fewer advisors and more people that need the advice. And looking at the demographics and the money, it's basically the retirees that have the vast majority of the wealth. So I would say overall that the future for this career is very, very good. So I think one of the future changes for financial planning is there's a new movement that's been created called the return on life. Rather than, there's been so much financial planning that's been based upon return of investment, which we call ROI in the investment world, to now ROL, which is a return on life. And it's basically asking people, if you have this amount of money, so on and so forth, what are you really looking for for instance, in retirement? So a basic software program will tell you if you have X amount of dollars and you were to live off of 4% of that and you had an estimated life expectancy of X, then you can crank out the numbers. But as we all know, that there's more to life than just those numbers. And it's more turning into a financial coach and helping people determine, okay, if you are going to retire, what will you be doing with your day? And everybody talks about the trips that they're going to take, or play golf, or play bocce, or something like that. You know, how much money will it take to be able to do that? So it's going to be more life-centered rather than more just based upon numbers. This is probably one of the fields that's a little bit different than the vast majority of fields, because very few people are working off of a salary. Most advisors, even if they're working for a firm and they are receiving a salary, the salary is really based upon performance and how you're doing, if you're bringing in new clients, and how much you're contributing to the bottom line. So it's really difficult to come up with those numbers. Most of the numbers that you'll see on the internet, they'll say a starting salary of maybe $40,000, and that the average planner, investment advisor is making about 90. You always have the outliers. They'll quote hedge fund guys that are making virtually millions and millions of dollars a year. Those are people that are abnormal to the group. Investment advisors are paid right now anyway a percentage of the assets that they have under management, and the average fee is 1% of the assets under management. The financial planning is harder to define in terms of a salary. They really don't have a fixed amount. There are some that will quote a price of, you know, $1,000 to thousands of dollars for a financial plan. So the parameters on how you're charging and the amount vary. And it's very difficult. And you also have to understand that based upon a survey, you're going to get survivorship biased. And what I mean by that is the companies that survive and they're doing well are usually the ones that respond to the survey. Now, I'll be quite honest, when I first started up my company, I was in my 20s and trying to develop a clientele. I didn't make money for probably the first 4 or 5 years. So I was actually losing money. But I was able to stick it out, and it's been profitable. But the numbers will vary a lot, and I have found that in this field that compensation primarily, the higher the compensation, the better the people are at marketing themselves and attracting clients. You can be the smartest financial planner or investment advisor in the world, but if you're just sitting in your office and doing analysis, that's really not going to pay you unless you're selling that advice. And so you really have to be good at marketing in order to make a lot of money in this field. One of the biggest negatives I learned when I worked for the financial planner when I first got out of school. And when you do a bad job, you can ruin somebody's life. That's a big negative. Unfortunately, he got into some investments that didn't work out, and a lot of people lost a lot of money. And it was a good learning experience for me because I had to make the calls to the people that lost all their money. And it was literally hundreds of millions of dollars, and people that ranged in age from retired military in their 50s to widows in their 80s. And that had a profound impact upon me, which made me even more conservative in my approach to the field. So that's a big negative. It's a negative for the advisor, and more importantly, it's a negative for the client. The other negatives, I would say, it's a "what have you done for me lately" career. That it's a long distance race, so there's rarely a finish line that you've achieved. So you have to be mentally prepared for that, and just know that you need to set goals for yourself, to know that if I do this, then I will categorize that as a success. So you're benchmarking yourself against either the market or the client expectations, and you have to come up with your own form of how are you doing. So the long hours, that's also a negative. It's a challenge to stay on top of all these things, and it takes a lot out of you. If you're a perfectionist, this is not the field for you. I started out as a perfectionist, and I had to change my whole attitude about it, because you're never going to make the perfect decision. You're never going to get into the perfect investment at the perfect time and then get out at the perfect time. You're always going to have shades of not being correct. So those are some of the biggest challenges with the field. Since most people are self-employed, they have numerous employers. So I view every client that I have as an employer. So for most advisors, they're going to have a couple hundred clients. And so they have a couple hundred bosses. I think the industry average is advisors will lose on average maybe 2 to 5% of their client base per year. And sometimes it's due to the advisor not doing a good job, and that can be based upon results. It can be due to poor communication, or you have clients that just pass on. And so since the profession is primarily self-employed, that's usually what happens in terms of layoffs, and they aren't widely publicized when that happens. For the few people that are employed, there are very few layoffs that occur in the field. And if they're good, it's easy to either find another job at another firm or start up your own practice. With the financial planning, it's multifaceted in terms of fields, and so there are some people that decide that they just want to go into insurance. There are some people that just do loans. There are some that just do investments. There are some that will specialize in retirement planning. There are some that will just do estate planning. So those are some of the offshoots of the general financial planning or the investments. Let's say probably 50% of the day is done on research. Probably 30% is client contact, and the remaining 20% is probably administrative tasks. This is a great profession. I've really enjoyed it. It's a great way to help a lot of people become financially independent, and it's also a way to help yourself become financially independent.